Breaking news this morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressing his anger over the nuclear deal with the U.S. and other world powers brokered with Iran. He joins us from Jerusalem. Mr. Prime Minister, thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Let's get right to it. As you probably heard from the president last week, he said there are three options for dealing with Iran's nuclear program. That is to bomb Iran and to start a war, essentially, in the Middle East, continue the sanctions as they stand now, or take this deal. Is he wrong about that?
Well, I think the alternatives are not either this bad deal or war. I think there's a third alternative, and that is standing firm, ratcheting up the pressure until you get a better deal. And a better deal would roll back Iran's vast nuclear infrastructure and require Iran to stop its aggression in the region, its terror worldwide, and its calls and actions to annihilate the state of Israel. That's a better deal. It's achievable.
And why does this deal not roll back Iran's nuclear program? Initially, it was thought that their program would be on hold for 10 years. It turns out that portions of this deal extend that out to 15 years and beyond that. Why can't you live with this deal?
It doesn't roll back Iran's nuclear program. It keeps a vast nuclear infrastructure in place. Not a single centrifuge is destroyed. Not a single nuclear facility is shut down, including the underground facilities that they built illicitly. Thousands of centrifuges will keep spinning, enriching uranium. That's a very bad deal. Secondly, Iran is going to have sanctions lifted, including crippling sanctions, pretty much up front. And that's going to have billions and billions of dollars flow into the Iranian coffers, not for schools or hospitals or roads, but to pump up Iran's terror machine throughout the world, and it's a military machine that is now engaged in conquest throughout the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, around the borders of Israel, elsewhere. So I think that's very bad. Third, the restrictions that are placed on Iran are only temporary, and after a few years, Iran will have unlimited capacity to build unlimited nuclear infrastructure. That's very bad. That's what's in the deal. Now here's what's not in the deal. The ending of their ICBMs, their intercontinental ballistic missile programs. That's not in the deal. And those missiles are only used for you. They're not used for us. They have missiles that can reach us, and they're geared for nuclear weapons. And secondly, no one is asking Iran at all in this deal to stop its aggression in the region and its calls to annihilate Israel. That's
clearly the White House has said that, and clearly the White House has said,
Israel and the region and the world.
And you said that it would threaten your country's survival. You stand by that?
Absolutely. If a country that vows to annihilate us and is working every day with conventional means and unconventional means to achieve that end, if that country has a deal that paves its way to nuclear weapons, many nuclear weapons, it endangers our survival. I'll tell you what else will happen. I think it'll also spark an arms race with the Sunni states, because they understand exactly what I just said.
Yeah, let me ask you about that in just a moment.
This deal will both threaten us and threaten our neighbors.
Let me ask you this, though, Mr. Prime Minister. If you continue the sanctions as they stand now, or even strengthen them, doesn't the risk exist then that Iran will take its program further underground, that the international community will not have any kind of inspection process to look at what's going on in Iran, and that their breakout timeline could be shortened dramatically, and that they could become a nuclear weapon power state in short order? Isn't that the risk you run with your approach?
No, I think quite the contrary. I think, first of all, I wouldn't bet the shop on inspections, because totalitarian regimes have a way of cheating. Iran has cheated in the past. North Korea, they said the same arguments about North Korea. It'll make them peaceful, it'll make them moderate, it'll make them abandon their program, and the opposite has happened. I think in this case, what is happening with this deal is that what has been illegitimate is being legitimized. Iran's nuclear program is being legitimized, and they're given the ability not only to maintain their infrastructure, but to, within a few years, to increase it. They don't even have to violate this deal. They can just walk into many bombs, and I think that's very dangerous. I think what is required is the application of very strong sanctions that have proven effective, and they were only applied, financial sanctions and the oil sanctions, the tough, biting sanctions were applied for the first time in 2012, got them immediately to the table. If they were to get them to the table, why, when you get to the table, do you start lifting them immediately? In fact, apply those pressures, because they do work, and that's what is required. There's still time to get a better deal and apply pressures on Iran to abandon, to roll back its nuclear program, and to stop its vast aggression in the region.
Mr. Prime Minister, you know that your critics have pointed out that back in 2012 at the UN, you held up that picture of a bomb and talked about how close Iran was to acquiring a nuclear weapon. We have the video, we're showing it on screen. You said that Iran would have enough enriched uranium to make a nuclear bomb by the summer of 2013. Weren't you wrong about that, sir?
Plans to build a bomb?
No, it's in fact the application of the pressures exactly at that time that rolled Iran back. I think it proves exactly the point that I'm making here. If you press Iran strongly enough, what seems unrealistic today becomes realistic tomorrow. You know, if you said 2 years ago, that the Syrian regime of Bashar Assad would remove all the chemicals from Syria, would destroy and dismantle and remove from Syria all the material and weapons making, chemical weapons that they had, you would have said that's unrealistic. You know, that would have been true then. But the application of subsequent pressure on Syria produced exactly the result that we need here. So what's unrealistic today, with the sufficient application of pressure, will become realistic for Iran tomorrow as well.
And let me ask you this, Mr. Prime Minister. You had Speaker John Boehner there in Israel. How much are you coordinating with him the Republican strategy up on Capitol Hill to block this deal?
I'm not approaching it on a partisan basis. I've talked to about 2/3 of the representatives of the United States, the House of Representatives, and probably an equal number of senators from both sides of the aisle. This is not a partisan issue. This is not even solely an Israeli issue. This is a world issue, because everyone is going to be threatened by the preeminent terrorist state of our time, keeping the infrastructure to produce not one nuclear bomb, but many, many nuclear bombs down the line. That's a palpable danger to the peace of the world. And I think it should concern everybody, Republicans, Democrats, independents, I don't care, and the citizens who want a peaceful world from every nation.
And how much is your very tense and let's be frank here, uncomfortable relationship with the president driving your opposition to this?
Not at all. And I don't think this is a personal issue, not between me and the president or the president and me. We had a respectful hour-long conversation the other day, as befits two allies, two democracies, and Israel views the United States as its great ally, and I think America has no greater ally in the world than Israel. But we do have a difference.
Do you trust the president?
A difference of policy, not a clash of personality.
Do you trust the president, Mr. Prime Minister?
I trust that the president is doing what he thinks is good for the United States, but I think that we can have a legitimate difference of opinion on this, because I think Iran is shown to be completely distrustful. It's not a country that you can place your trust in, and it's not a country that you're going to resolve its congenital cheating. You're just not going to resolve it by placing more inspectors there.
But do you trust the president? You said that you trust the president to do what's best for the United States, but do you trust him?
I think it's not a question of personal trust. Of course, we have a mutual, respectful relationship, and I always respect both the presidency of the United States and this president of the United States. But as the Prime Minister of the one and only Jewish state, when I see a country, a terrorist regime committed to our destruction, and not only to our destruction, having the path, a clear path to the bomb, it's my obligation to speak out, as I'm doing now, as I'll do in any forum.
And Mr. Prime Minister, I guess you've seen the reaction in the Israeli press to this Iran nuclear deal. And I want to put a quote up on screen from Haaretz, from a columnist in Haaretz. He wrote that this is not a bad deal. He said Israel will have a hard time fighting this agreement or portraying it as bad. If Iran upholds the terms, its nuclear threat will be severely mitigated. Isn't it true, Mr. Prime Minister, that you may represent all Israelis, but you don't speak for all Israelis when it comes to this deal?
Well, I was just reelected by a fairly substantial margin, and the people of Israel knew what my position is on Iran. Let me tell you this. The argument, there was no argument in the elections about Iran. In fact, people said we share the Prime Minister's views on Iran. A major figure in the opposition today published in his blog a complete support of my position on Iran. So it's not a partisan issue in Israel. I think that the overwhelming majority of Israelis understand that Iran seeks our destruction, They don't buy the notion that Iran has spent these vast billions on a peaceful nuclear program. Iran is awash in oil and gas for their grandchildren's grandchildren. Everybody understands they want a path to nuclear weapons. Everybody understands that instead of putting the pressure on them to stop this program and change their policy, in fact, the opposite is happening with this proposed deal. They're getting a free path to the bomb. The sanctions are removed. They're continuing their aggression as we speak. And a few days ago, a senior Iranian general said the destruction of Israel is non-negotiable. Well, I guarantee you, you may have a dissenting voice here and there in Israel. We're a real democracy, a real democracy. But in our real democracy, the overwhelming majority of Israelis support the position I've just put forward because they know their life is on the line.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, Mr. Prime Minister. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.